So good morning. And this morning I wanted to talk about the relationship between the 8 worldly winds and our intentions, or the intentions that we kind of live throughout the day with. They're called the 8 worldly winds because they tend to toss us around like strong winds. They can even kind of batter us around quite a bit. Like it reminds me in New Zealand, the wind sometimes in Wellington gets so bad that they actually have places to hold on to at the street corners when the winds come, and it's not that unusual. But that's a lot of time that's really what's happening in our minds. And a lot of what keeps our minds from being at peace in our lives. No matter how, how carefully we set up our lives, how hard we work to always get the wins we want, it doesn't happen. It doesn't work. So we're always kind of chasing these wins, trying to get the good ones and avoid the bad ones. So very simply, there are 4 pairs, and the first 2 are kind of the personal ones. They're pleasure and pain, my pleasure and pain. They're gain and loss, things you gain and lose in your life. And the other 2 can be more interrelational. So praise and blame. I mean, we can praise and blame ourselves, right? Some of us are very familiar with that, but there's also something that happens in the bigger world. And the other one is the last one is fame and disrepute. Now a lot of us who I don't want fame, but there's something very related to fame called status. And so fame or status, which sometimes can be as simple as being, I'm a good artist, that just that little bit of wanting to be seen as a good something. So these are all the things, these very common human things that force us to drive us. So changing gears a little bit, the first time I saw a living statue. Does everybody know what a living statue is? So I was in San Francisco, and a living statue is a performer. They're usually street performers, so they'll perform at fairs. And they basically, what they do is they get in a costume, and they paint themselves. And the first one I saw was just like a silvery white, and they're in costume, their face is painted, everything's silvery white, and they just don't move. They're just like a living statue. And I remember, at the time I was a yoga student, and I really struggled 5 minutes holding still, standing up. All I was doing was just standing up, tree pose, they called it, just standing. 5 minutes, and I was like, really hard. And this person, I kind of went for a walk, came back an hour later, they're still standing. It's quite a feat. And so now moving up to some years later, there's an artist, a musician, performer, kind of an unusual musician, performer. Her name's Amanda Palmer. And, maybe you've heard of her, maybe you haven't, But before she made it in music, she was a living statue. And she did it for 7 years, and this is how she made a living. And her gig was called the 8-Foot Bride. And so she would stand on a pedestal, and she'd paint herself white, dressed in a wedding gown, with a veil, and holding a bouquet of flowers, of real flowers. And she would basically stand there for, usually they do like an hour and a half at a time per set. And there'd be a little basket, at the floor, people could leave a donation. And when she reflected on it, she happened to be a Zen student, a Zen and yoga student. And she said that, yeah, I'm really not a disciplined person, you know. But when I thought of doing this, I thought I can do one thing at a time. And that's just stand still. That's all I have to do, just stand still. And then she qualified it, stand still and love whoever shows up. And so so this is what she did for 7 years as the way of making a living. And so people would come up to her, and look her deep in the eyes, and she would be really connecting with each person. This was like her practice, to really show up fully for each person. And then if they chose to give a donation, she would surprise them by moving and handing them a flower. And so it's just very, very sweet, But what really struck me was just the way, her intention was just to do one thing. She wasn't going to do a lot of things, but just this one beautiful thing of lovingly standing still. But a living statue is also affected by the 8 worldly winds. And so just, to touch on them now, and really maybe connect in yourself, as you reflect on them, like pleasure and pain, where it can refer to the really small little pleasures, like sipping a cup of warm tea, or the really big pleasure, maybe reconnecting with a long-lost friend, and you just feel all this intense pleasure and joy. So it can be physical, can be emotional, and same thing on the other side, the little aches, of standing in line too long, or the really strong ones of when we're ill, or heartbroken, or so it can range. Pleasure and pain can be just this huge realm, and so all of you here, I think you all experienced a little bit of one of those in the last sit, right? Anybody feel a little discomfort at some point? Anybody felt a little bit of peace, a little bit of happiness, pleasure? So maybe some actually felt a lot of pain, right? Some of us have different conditions in our life. And so the art is how do we relate to those when they arise? And if our intention is to always feel good, it means that we're in conflict with probably half of what happens to us. And what happens when we always want to feel good, that means that we start grabbing it. And, don't go away that good feeling. Let me have my 3rd cookie. I know I'm full, but I want a little more pleasure, right? So we're always chasing after it, not wanting to let it go. The example that I often go to with this is, I used to, moved away from my mother, so I didn't see her that often, but whenever I would come to see her, she'd open the door and her eyes would just light up with joy to see me. She'd just be so happy, so delighted. But before I even got through the door, she'd say, "How long are you staying?" And you know what? Whatever I said wasn't enough. It didn't. Only if I moved back in would be enough. But this is what we do. We keep chasing after those good feelings, those pleasures. So what's the alternative instead of being, seeking to be comfortable all the time? Seeking to be at peace with whatever shows up could be an alternative. What kind of intention can we bring to our lives so that we are present for whatever shows up, and we're at peace with whatever shows up? It doesn't mean that if we notice that, oh wow, I'm really sitting crooked. Maybe I'll be a little more comfortable if I sit a little straighter. We might still rearrange and be a little more comfortable. There's nothing wrong with being a little more comfortable, but it's how we hold that. We might not be able to get more comfortable. So how do we still find a sense of happiness, or at least a sense of peace? So having an attitude, an intention of goodwill towards ourselves or of kindness towards situation. What can be our intentions in the moment? Intention of letting go. In Buddhism we teach the 3 wise intentions, goodwill, non-harming, and letting go or renunciation. So those are the three sides of the qualities that really allow us to be present with whatever shows up and have a heart that's at peace when these worldly winds, can arise and fall away. So with gain and loss, and you think about the living statue, I am positive she had plenty of little cool wind, feeling really sweet, and probably quite a bit of, wow, this hurts. and learning to meet that, at one point she said, I have the best job in the world. I have the best job in the world. So gain and loss. So, we all get things, right? We get things we want all the time. It might be something simple. We go to the store, we buy dinner materials, or we get, the bigger things in life. We might get a relationship, a friendship. We might get a career, family, all the different things that we, skills, learn how to play music, learn how to work with wood, sports, learn how to play tennis. So, maybe we travel, we get all these, a nice place to live. We have all these different things we can gain in life. And we can lose all of them, right? We can, people who've been master pianists have injured their hands and lost that skill, right? So everything we have, people get divorced, children move away, so, we all have losses in these lives. This life is made up of both all these great things we want. Well, it might be minor, that we get, and they might be major. And we have all sorts of losses in this life. And one teacher said, spiritual growth is a constant state of loss. Which is kind of interesting thing, because we are actually constantly letting go of everything, every moment. Otherwise, how can we show up? And some people give such importance to some things, that's one thing that's always amazed me, and I'm just culturally not in tune with this, is that people get devastated when their team loses in sports. Incredibly devastated. And so we give things a lot of meaning, I guess the meaning must be, this is really important, they win, my life depends on it. At least some people act that way. I remember, it was her first newer car, and it looked perfect, And, somebody came by on a bicycle and just keyed every car down the street. And I remember, thinking, just, we're actually standing outside IMC at the time. It's like when I first started coming, it was like back in Palo Alto. And it was like right after Dharma talk, so it was a pretty equanimous place. And I said, next time I'll buy a car, I'll do that right away. I'll keep my car right away, then I don't have to worry about it anymore. But gain and loss, right? And we lose everything, right? Eventually, we lose our health, our abilities, our capacities, and we lose our lives. We lose everything, everyone we've ever loved, everything in our lives. We eventually lose. And Suzuki Roshi said it beautifully. He said, life is going to sea in a boat will sink. I love that, because, that's the reality of it. That's the reality of it. And there's nothing wrong with wanting healthy relationships and working towards these wonderful things in our lives. It's how much the heart is at peace. It's like sometimes people, become workaholics. They're working in their career, but they're so tight. We actually have a name for them, type A personalities. People that give themselves, headaches, high blood pressure from being so contracted instead of working out of joy, instead of working in a peaceful way. I remember when I used to work in a different, realm. I used to, I loved what I did, and I felt at the end of the day I wasn't exhausted by it. I was kind of inspired by it, because I was just able to just do it full-heartedly. One of the things, that we get attached to, I was a yoga student, and I was really feeling good. It's like I'd been practicing for a while, and I was really strong and flexible, and so I just felt really good. For the first time in my life, my body felt really alive and really, really strong. And I injured myself, and I had a really bad injury, and couldn't, my whole leg was kind of messed up a bit, and I remember talking to my friend who's a yoga teacher, and I said, oh, I can't do yoga now. It's going to be months and months of rehabilitating this before I can do yoga. She said, no. Yoga is about what you can do, not what you can't do. And so I found ways of doing yoga with what I could do. And it brought a lot of ease to my body. It brought a lot of ease to my mind. Maybe I couldn't do, lotus anymore, but I could still, stretch my upper body, and I could still be really present in my body, So, and this is really the practice, We see, we're meditating, and the mind is just like restless and chaotic. This is what we can do. We can show up for it. We can show up for it with peaceful attitude. It doesn't have to be fixed. It doesn't have to be changed. Just by having a peaceful attitude towards this chaotic mind already transforms it. It's already something that we can observe, we can be mindful of. So praise and blame. Now we're getting into the relational part, where, as I said, we can often blame ourselves or praise ourselves. Oh, I did really great, didn't I? Or blame yourself. I used to play racquetball with this guy, and every time he used a ball, he would hit himself in the head and say, "God, idiot, idiot," And it was kind of unpleasant to play with him. I thought we were playing a game. But who knows what we blame ourselves for? I remember when I first started really paying attention to my mind in meditation. Every time I got distracted, I would blame myself. You screwed up. there'd be this little mean little voice that would blame me. And it's amazing how consistent that was. I would failed, you blew it. And of course, you do that 100 times a minute, especially in the beginning, and, maybe only 50 in the advanced. Uh, um, and the thing about failure is failures are the building blocks of learning, right? If you watch a little kid learn to walk, what do? They fall down, right? And how many times they fall down? They don't, oops, I blew it. I didn't get it perfect. Never trying again. They just fall down, learn to get up. And that's how they learn to walk. They learn to figure it out. They learn to strengthen their muscles. And that's how we learn any skill. Playing piano, you hit the wrong note. Okay, now you hit it right. You've got the wrong rhythm. Okay, now you've got it right. And this is how you learn. But you have to fail to learn. And so to have a relationship with the natural failures in life, a wholesome relationship. The quote I really like from Niels Bohr, he was a Nobel Prize physicist. He said, an expert is someone who has made all the mistakes that can be made in a very narrow field. But I love that. That's the expert, is the one who screws up the most. And so let's make lots of mistakes. It's okay. This is how we learn. We learn more. We try more. We're more adventurous. We're more willing to talk to a stranger. More willing to make fools of ourselves. Amanda, the 8-foot bride, she would get, people who would say to her, oh, God, you're awesome, you're great, thank you. She'd get all this wonderful praise. And, she noticed she would feel herself kind of puffing up with the praise. And then people come by and say, get a job, And, she said her mind would come to defense, say, I have a job, this is my job, And eventually she was like, oh, okay, praise, blame, and just allowing them to course through her. Because when you're just doing one thing, being still, you see pretty clearly eventually. You see these things, you see these movements of the mind, grasping. And, again, that's, what are we doing in meditation? We're living statues, right? The Buddha said, they blamed those who remain silent. They blamed those who speak much. They blamed those who speak little. There's none in the world who is not blamed. How much energy do we put forth trying not to be blamed? The thing about praise is that, for me, I like being praised, but I didn't like being told. I'd like to hear about it from somebody else. But when somebody would praise me to my face, I always felt uncomfortable. It took me a long time to find my way to say, oh, thank you. A simple thank you. So we have all sorts of different relationships of praise. And then, we can take praise and, as I mentioned, get conceited from praise. You're really good at something and people are always telling you how great you are and you get conceited by it. Or, people, it always, it would always bother me to see people praising kids for being pretty. Especially little girls for being pretty. Oh, you're so pretty, you're so pretty, you're so pretty. And then, you get old and you're so ugly, you're so ugly, you're so ugly. Praise and blame. They come and go. The motivation to get praise disconnects us from people. Because we want something from them, right? we want them to like us. We're wanting, or not wanting to be blamed, so you kind of tiptoe around things. When we connect with our goodwill towards others, towards our kindness towards others, we become interested in them. When we're wanting to be praised, we're interested in ourselves. We're wanting, and so that's where the connection rises. And even if our intention is to connect with others, those winds arise in us. If we're not, we may not be purified of wanting to be liked, wanting to be praised, wanting to be seen as successful. Those things can arise in us, and they can arise in a bigger field. We don't have to keep feeding them or being run by them and chasing them. We can have it in a bigger field of, oh yeah, this is my intention, is to show up and be here and to love, and to connect, to hold my life in a peaceful way. If we didn't cling, we wouldn't be practicing. There'd be no need for practice. So clinging is not a mistake. This is, it's unnecessary, unhelpful, makes us suffer. But this is what we do as human beings, or the whole human civilization is just filled with clinging. All the suffering in humanity is just filled with clinging. This is the human condition. It's not for personal failure, which we often look at those things as personal failures. So the last pair, the status or fame, and then disrepute. This is about our image, or how we are seen in society, how we are, or our place in society, how other people see us. Some people like to brag about everything they accomplish, make sure everybody knows. I think, you may have done that, or maybe you've seen other people do that. I remember kind of looking for places in conversations where I could kind of weave in my accomplishments, the little ways that the ego wants to get its little perks. Yeah. And I've also been where, we're talking, I had an idea. It was a really good idea, and shared it with a group. And then somebody's sharing my idea, and everybody's like really liking the idea. And it's like, I want to make sure they know it's my idea, it's mine, And so these little pieces of this is the status, the wanting to be seen. I'm the one who did that. I found the best restaurant, the best one. It's me who found it. Not I want to share this really good food with you, but no, I'm the one who found it. I found it. One of the things that always used to strike me, even though I had all these same feelings, but God, this is so blatant. People would have a bumper sticker that said, proud parent of an honor student. It's like, and maybe it was like totally didn't have this flavor, but for me that was like, wow, that's like showing how much ego you have, and then you see the other side of it. You see like Olympic athletes, right, who are just incredible athletes, and people who get the bronze and feel like complete failures. It's like we attach these things to status, the things that give us status, and the bronze to them was failure. We see it you really see it in school, when you're in, grade school, high school. You're either popular or unpopular. You're in this clique or that clique. And then you see, it reverse, right? You see some of the nerds who are now have these huge companies, and they're the successful ones, and the other ones have the lesser jobs, and it just kind of goes on, this whole status game, that people play. But it's not so much fun. It's not a fun game. We create a lot of suffering for ourselves when we're motivated by wanting to be liked, or by wanting to get approval, by wanting to be admired. An example, that I've often used to some students, is let's say we're making lunch for a friend. And their initial idea is like, oh, well, we'll get to spend time talking. I'll make them some good food, and I'll make something really nice for them. And you're kind of happy about it. And then you sit down to plan it, and you start worrying. Oh, are they going to like that? Are they going to like that? And then you've got to clean the house, and you get, it's like, oh, it's not clean enough. And you go through this whole rigmarole of being very tense about this. This is just, some people have this particular quirk. And so instead of just being with your friend and it being a fun thing, it becomes this, and maybe at some point you enjoy the company once you've gone through the hell of getting there. But all of that can be done with a different intention, because the reason that it's so painful when we do it that way is that we're trying to be liked. We're trying to get it perfect. We're trying to give a good impression. We want to be, seen a certain way. Oh, she makes great food. Oh, she keeps a great house. Whatever it is that we're wanting, how we want to be seen. But when the focus instead is like to love her. Oh, I'm going to make something to love her. Okay, she doesn't eat gluten. Okay, I'll do something gluten-free. But it's coming from a very different place. And the whole thing, we can appreciate the process of cleaning. And it doesn't have to be perfect. We don't have to hold it so tightly. And if the meal fails, we had an epic failure once with a meal. It was New Year's Eve, and I think we were supposed to go out, but with some friends, they were coming over, driving from a long distance, and we had plans, but somehow the place we were supposed to became unavailable. And so we didn't have food in the house, but we found one package of pasta. And so, we put up the pasta and then put on some good music, and we're having fun, and we're talking, and we're talking, and we're talking, and never hear the timer. And, show up, and there's this big green congealed mass of spinach pasta, we couldn't call it pasta anymore. And, we all just start laughing, it was just so classic, and it's okay, we survived not having dinner on New Year's Eve. And fortunately, the state we were in, we're having such a good time, I didn't feel like a personal failure. But easily could have gone the other way. So I want to tell you about, and maybe some of you have heard this, is a Zen story about Su Dong Po. He was a Chinese 10th century poet, artist, statesman, and he was he had a good friend who was a Zen master, and I always forget the name, Zen master Fo Yin, and who he would often discuss Buddhism with, and he was they're both very, Su Dong Po is a very serious Buddhist student. He really took it to heart, and so they would often discuss this. And they lived kind of across a river from each other, so you had to kind of take a raft to get across. And one day, Su Dong Po was very inspired by his meditation, and he wrote a poem. And it's just 4 lines, okay? So, I bow my head to the heaven within heavens, okay? Rays of light illuminating the universe. The 8 winds cannot move me. Sitting still upon the golden lotus. So he was impressed with himself. And he sent a servant to immediately hand carry the poem to Fo Yin. And, he took the raft across the water and brought him the poem. And so Fo Yin looked at the poem, and he smiled, and he wrote 1 word on it and sent it back. And the 1 word on it was fart. And so Su Dong Po gets the manuscript back. And, he's like, assuming that he's going to get praise and so he sees that, and he is outraged. He is, what the hell, that lousy old monk, who does he think he is, and he gets, dressed, goes across the river, rafts over, but the door's closed. And there's a note on it for him. And it says, the 8 winds cannot move me. 1 fart blows me across the water. But this is what we do, right? This is how we are, these little insults, the little insults. So, as Amanda Palmer said, as a statue, all she needed to do was to be still and love. That's it. And, that's what the practice leads us to. It shows us to show up for each moment with a certain amount of stillness and with a heart full, with a heart open, a heart ready. Regardless of what winds of change have shown up, what pleasures and pain, what gains and losses, we just keep showing up for, with an open heart to whatever shows up. In Zen, they very much stress the benefit of doing one thing at a time. And kind of, you kind of hear a little bit of a put down on multitasking, not being quite a Zen thing to do. And, there was a Zen student, who heard this teaching regularly. When drinking tea, just drink tea, right? But one day he sees his teacher drinking tea and reading the newspaper. And of course he goes up to him, and he says, he's kind of shocked, It's like, I thought you said when drinking tea, you're supposed to just drink tea. And, and the teacher says when drinking tea and reading the newspaper, just drink the tea and read the newspaper. We don't need to be perfect. We don't need to be rigid. We can just be, these winds are there, or attachments are there. And how do we hold our attachments? How do we relate to getting caught up by craving? How do we relate to that? Can we hold them with just, oh yeah, being attached to that, but being attached with an open hand? Can we be attached to something and yet give it room for it to be seen, to be healed in its own time? We can aim to show up for whatever is in our lives, whatever comes next, with this open-handed attitude, towards any wind of change that shows up. Just be completely just open-handed. Whatever arises can arise, including our most ridiculous egos sometimes. Sometimes just the ego has these, things that you don't want everybody to see, right? It wants a certain way, it's just this little, that's what showed up. That's what showed up, okay. In the moment that we can meet that with an open-handed acceptance, it transforms it. It's no longer, I am that ego. It's, that arose and that went away. It has room to change. It has room to do both, drink our tea and read the newspaper. It has room for both. So thank you. Thank you.